work in a 3,000-member church in the suburbs. We're very white, very similar socioeconomically.
Yeah.
So what you just shared about the poor and all the book of Jonah, I'd like maybe some specific practical ways that we can care for those around us. We'd love for the fabric of our church to change a little bit, but it seems I don't want that the reason to be reaching for the poor. But anyway, thanks.
Okay, but not just a second. I can, again, speak very off the cuff. There's an awful lot of books now there's an awful lot of books out there talking to people. If you live in a very affluent, homogeneous place, and there's plenty of places like that, keep in mind that they are going to, that's a shrinking part of the American pie, that the very white, very affluent, some people feel like this is going to go on forever, but it's not going to stay that way, that's all. So in some ways, I should be patient and it'll come up to your door, but you ought to be getting ready. I think you ought to be talking about, you should be talking to people. You need to do the biblical teaching first. I don't know, I wrote a book, Generous Justice, trying so hard to not only make sure we're being biblical rather than political, trying to balance those things. So for example, one of the balances you want to say is that if you're going to be caring in the neighborhood as much as you can, even in a homogeneous place, you've got elderly people, you've got single parent families, you've got disabled, handicapped people of various sorts right there. These are all people who actually are somewhat disempowered for various reasons. And you're going to have them anywhere. I remember over the years telling people, at least start there and find out what those needs are and make space in your church. The other thing is, those are people that fairly easily probably don't have as much of a cultural problem coming into your church. In other words, you don't have the cultural barrier. The second thing to say is that I am of the belief that what your church can basically do to reach really needy populations, maybe a little further away, is to try to get people to start their own little nonprofits. I do think it's a danger for, in New York City, for example, one of the things I often saw was churches very concerned about the neighborhood. They would be preaching the gospel. So let's just say you have 5 elders over this church. They're preaching the gospel, and they set up a low-income housing. They bought a home, to do low-income housing, and they started a drug rehab center over here, and they started a ministry to prostitutes. I remember years ago there was a Nazarene church right in Times Square, back when Times Square was a really wild and woolly place, 30 years ago, when it was a frightening place to walk through. And they said, we're here in Times Square, we're going to meet our, and they said drug addicts and poor people and homeless people and prostitutes, and they had ministries to all of them, and it killed the poor elders because the elders not only had to run a church, but what do they know about those things? What do they know about drug rehabilitation? And what we learned over the years was to say, encourage your people and promote those people, but let people in your church who've got a real heart for needy populations form their own 501c3s and get their own expertise. You also don't need ministers to do those things. Lay people very often are better at it. You need teachers and doctors and people like that. So let your lay people form these 501c3s to get out there and do it instead of making the church itself try to run all those ministries, which I don't think is the main job of the church. It's to preach the gospel. Okay? So those are 2 ideas.